What's going on, team? How's everybody doing today? The Elite Builders Nation getting together again. I got my brother from another mother, Mr. Jose Luis Morales, with us today. Looking sharp as always, bro. Not sure if you have pants on, but you are looking sharp. Top up. Let's go. Let's see. Oh, got the jeans and the shoes. Let's go. I love it. So how are you, bro? You doing well?
Good. Yeah. Excited to hear about this. Excited, just to hear about how the event was and what you learned and what you can share.
Yeah, and that's the intention, right? So I had the good fortune. I've been invited a few times on Pace Morby. Shout out to Pace, his platform and his community Squad Up, which is a pretty fantastic community. And he invited me to attend his first event, right? It's 3,000 people in the room. Super kind, super gracious, super generous. He actually sat me up front and center, you know what I mean? Front row, like 50-yard line tickets, and was just a wonderful host. And it was really cool to kind of witness and watch, you know, the way that he's building community and just him as a leader. And I think me and you both can learn from that. Mm-hmm. The thing that I wanted to kind of go over was something that I learned from one of the speakers that were there. It's a guy named Donald Miller. Mm-hmm. And he wrote a book called Story Brand. And it's interesting because I'd heard of this before. You know, I'd done some training, you know, on speaking and things of that nature. And I'd heard the book come up and people saying like, hey, you got to read this book. And I just hadn't actually read it yet. And he was at the event and he gave a wonderful talk. And there were some key takeaways from the talk. And it's very applicable to what we do as salespeople, not only as leaders, but also what we do as salespeople when we're having conversations. So I just like to go over some of those points and then we can dissect them as it pertains to selling real estate in high volume and setting appointments and, you know, negotiating and things of that nature.
Perfect.
So one of the kind of premise of Story Brand is that our brains are doing two things unconsciously all the time. The first thing that it's doing is it's trying to decide if information would help you to survive or thrive, right? Things like, you know, food, water, shelter, you know, reproduction, stuff like that. It's constantly monitoring for survival and thriving. Now, in a sales context, we've talked about before, like pain or pleasure, and that would be surviving or thriving, right? The second thing that it's doing, Jose, is it's trying to conserve calories. Because there's so much information, it's actually constantly filtering out information that it deems not important. That's not going to help us to survive or thrive, right? So how does this pertain to real estate? Well, what most agents do when they're having conversations with people or attempting to set appointments, they're not asking questions about surviving or thriving. They're instead trying to lead with authority. Like, don't you know who I am? And I've sold all these properties and that sort of thing. Versus saying like, hey, Jose, you know, my job's to help you. It's never to talk you to do anything. If you don't mind me asking, your home's lovely. It's in a great geographic area, great school district. I don't need to tell you that. Was there any particular reason you were even considering selling it? And that will help flesh out, is this about survival, which is what would be examples of survival? Well, death, divorce, job relocation, financial, right? That's about survival. Or is this about thriving? I want a bigger property. I want to relocate and be closer to my family, right? So it's one of those two. It's either survival or thriving. And if I'm not asking questions around that, I'm going to have a harder time connecting with people and a harder time holding their attention, Jose, which is super interesting because what we're doing unconsciously is saying like, hey, is this going to help me survive or thrive? And is this complicated for me to understand? Because if the answer is no to both of those, you're going to lose my attention immediately. So what do I mean by that? He gave an example of like, let's say you're at a dinner party and somebody says to you, hey, Jose, what do you do? And you're like, well, it's a little complicated. Immediately, you know what your brain says? Yeah, this is not going to help me survive or thrive. It's going to take too long to understand. And what do? Whoop, stop paying attention. That's pretty amazing, right? So the correlation that I made with sales and what we do is, again, most agents lead with authority initially when trying to set appointments versus asking questions around, hey, is this move about survival or thriving for you? And then if it takes me a long time to explain how I can help, right, you're going to lose my attention. Versus, let's say Jose tells me like, yeah, we want to, it's financial. I know that that's surviving, that's pain. Okay. And is it an option for you to not sell this home and still move? Well, no. Is it an option for you to rent a home and still move? No. Okay. So it sounds like in order for you to get what you want, the time you want, you need to sell the property. Is that right? Well, yeah. And ideally, in terms of what you want, because that's what's most important, how soon would you like to make this sale happen? Well, like right away, if it's at all possible. So let me ask it this way, because you strike me to be straightforward and to the point. I'm the same way. If you knew that simply by augmenting your approach in some way, maybe just a few adjustments, that you could get an offer that was acceptable in the next, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I'd have to imagine that would be something you'd be interested in. Is that correct? Well, yeah.
Correct.
All right. Well, just by you saying that demonstrates that we should get together and discuss the options, may make a suggestion. So do you see what we're doing there? It's what I'm finding fascinating, Jose, is we've done this as salespeople, but now I have a framework, really, that's explaining why it's so powerful and potent. Is because we're getting to pain, like surviving or thriving. Then very quickly, do you see how I made it very easy for you to understand? If you knew simply by augmenting the approach, just a few things, that you could get an offer in the next 2 to 3 weeks that would allow you to sell this home and cash out and make the move, I'd have to imagine that would be worth 10 to 15 minutes of your time. You see how that's very simple and concise? How many calories does that take to figure out? Not much. Well, what do most people do? Like, well, we have this 18-point plan and fucking, it's like too much processing, too many calories. So I'm curious, like, what's coming up for you and what are you aware of as we have this conversation?
So what's coming up for me is just talking to people about what they're motivated by. Like, meaning that if you're motivated, this is what comes up for me. Whenever I'm having conversations with sellers and somebody is selling and buying, most people tend to have conversations with sellers about the selling portion of it. And the seller may not be motivated to sell. They may be motivated to buy. So once you identify, like, if they're motivated to sell or motivated to buy, I tell them to focus on whichever the seller is motivated by. So if they're motivated to buy, most of the conversation should revolve around their goals to purchase. And then what comes out of it is the listing. If they're motivated to sell, then obviously continue having the conversation to sell. But like, even with expires, when a property comes off the marketplace and they were selling and buying, it's like, okay, was it more or less that you weren't getting any offers on your home, or were you not able to find the right property? Oh, we weren't able to find the right property. Most agents would be like, well, I can get your home sold. I can do this. They're having the wrong conversation with the owner, because the owner's problem is not selling their property. The owner's problem is finding the right property. Which at that point, I would move the conversation over to the buy. But it kind of makes me think of, like, it makes me feel like if you're having conversations with what's important to them or what they're looking to accomplish, your conversations are going to go a lot further.
100%. Because think about it, you're working in conjunction with the way that our brains naturally work. It's trying to figure out, will this help me survive and thrive? And is this going to cause a lot of calories for me to understand? If it's too many calories for me to understand, you're stop paying attention.
And you shut down.
That's right. Which is awesome. What's up, Roy? How you doing, brother? So I thought that was very interesting. The second thing that was very interesting is he said that stories have the capacity. They're the only tool that we have as humans that can hold human attention for hours at a time, Jose. That's very true. And there's a framework to stories. Okay. There's only about 7 different kind of stories that work. And if you can understand the framework, then you can cast stories in this way. So the thing that I think is very applicable to sales is part of the story framework is there's a hero and there's a guide, right? And usually there's a villain as well. Now, the hero is trying to get something, right? They're trying to accomplish something, whether it's get the girl or the guy, they're trying to, like, be successful. Like, they're trying to accomplish something. And the guide, their role is to help the hero accomplish the goal and objective. What's so interesting, Jose, is that who do you think is the strongest person, strongest character in that story? Is it the hero? Is it the guide? Or is it the villain? It's not a trick question. Whatever you say is fine.
I think the guide, maybe.
The guide is the strongest. It is not the weakest. It's the strongest person.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah. It's the strongest.
Yeah.
The second weakest is the hero, Jose. Think about all the movies. So there's, these great stories that have, captured unlimited amounts of attention, human attention, and made insane amounts of money. Let's say like Star Wars. Luke Skywalker is the main character. He's the hero. Who's the guide? Obi-Wan. And Luke, if you think about it, at the beginning, he's the second weakest person in character. He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't understand the Force. He doesn't know how to use it. Look at Harry Potter. Harry is the main character. Who's his guide? Dumbledore. Harry doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to do magic, right? And he's there to guide him. So every story has that. And what's very interesting is we root for the guide. We don't root for the hero. And the hero being the second weakest person in the story, how do most salespeople try to position themselves to their clients? As the hero. Well, don't you know who I am? And don't you know how many homes that I've sold? And I've sold da-da-da-da-da. Who's the actual hero, Jose?
They are. And you're the guide.
Think about that, bro. And you're the guide. They're the hero in the story. They're trying to accomplish something. They're trying to move to Texas. They're trying to downsize. They're trying to get out of a financial hardship. We as salespeople need to position ourselves as the guide, not the hero. And that's a thing that I see. We see it all the time in the role plays that we do with people, and we do it live and stuff. And I think traditional kind of coaching and training about what to say and how to say it has taught people to position themselves as the hero
versus the guide,
versus being the guide.
Well, here's what it makes me think about. Like, okay, so if you're going to be a good guide, what tools, what resources, and what skills would you need in order to be a good guide? Because I'll tell you where that came up. Where it came up for me is that, like, yesterday I interviewed somebody and they talked about this NAF cash program. Basically what they do is they buy the property ahead of time and then they resell it to a buyer. So the benefits are that you can make a non-contingent offer if you're selling a property, and you can make a cash offer. And what I thought about right now is, as a good guide, you would be communicating that to your client. Hey, have you explored this option? This is how this can help you. And then you're presenting something to the client that he wasn't aware of. Now you're being a good guide because you're aware of different programs available that can help them.
That's exactly right. And he said that there's two things that you have to deploy to be a good guide. The first, you know what's so interesting, Jose? It's empathy. Mm-hmm. Understanding. Hey, listen, I understand that the situation's really frustrating for you, in terms of having it on the market and not selling and having a goal and objective to make a move. I know that that's very stressful, right? Or let's say when I'm working with probates, listen, first and foremost, I just want to say that I'm appreciative of the opportunity, to share some information with you. I'm aware that there's two components here. Number one is the emotional component, and I just want to let you know that I'm sensitive to that. The second is the kind of practical component, like how to sell the home and things of that nature. So my goal and objective today is to be respectful of both and share with you some information so that way you can be fully equipped and you can make the decision that you feel is best in terms of how to proceed. So I'm deploying empathy. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, I know that you do because we've worked on it together, with Gremlin teaming and stuff like that, where you can be like, hey, yeah, listen, I understand that that's frustrating, or, yep, I get it. I see why you would feel that way. So the first is the deployment of empathy, which is the opposite of what most people do. Because if they position themselves as a hero, what do they lead with? Bravado, arrogance, like, I'm so cool, look at me, I'm in the Lambo, I'm in this, I'm in that. You know what I mean? It's really about themselves. There's no empathy there. So the first tool to deploy is empathy. You know what the second is? You have to demonstrate competency. So the first is empathy. The second is you have to demonstrate competency. And but those two things position you as a guide. So in other words, let's say somebody challenges you like, hey, Jose, like, why do you think you could get my home sold? It's like, listen, I can hear in your voice that you're frustrated. I know you've had a lot of these phone calls. And, my intention is to just share with you some information with regards to what we do to help families just like you accomplish their goals and objectives. And, really what I hear you saying to me is, what could we actually do to get it done? Because that's really all you care about. Is that right? Well, yeah. And, it's interesting because we're going to do the exact same thing that we've done to sell 80 something $million worth of real estate in the last 12 months. Or we're going to do the exact same thing that we've done to help 2,000 families just like you accomplish their goals and objectives. So it's really not a question to me of whether or not we could or couldn't help. We definitely can. It's really just a question of me figuring out what you're looking to accomplish and why. So that way we can come up with a game plan for you and your family so you guys get what you want in the time you want. Does that make sense? Do you notice, Jose? You've heard me do this thousands of times.
Yeah.
But do you see what we're doing? I'm positioning myself as the guide. Empathy first. I understand where you're coming from. And only when I'm challenged will I be like, yeah, like, we've had the good fortune of helping a lot of families just like you accomplish their goals and objectives. Reviews, also position yourself as a guide. Here are other families that we've guided through this process. Isn't that so interesting?
I think it's interesting how it's like just putting the customer first. And even when I'm listening, there's this podcast called Founders. It's a great podcast. I'm like in love with it. I'm hearing the stories of all the different founders like Kinko's, Tesla, everything. And a lot of times, what these founders do is they always put the customer first. That's the core thing. Like they're obsessed with how can I create a better experience for the customer. In other words, like how can I make the customer the hero and how can I just be the guide and help them accomplish their goal? And I think that if you communicate in that way to even clients, which it helps, because even if you communicate to them, like, look, my job is just to help you accomplish whatever your goals are. If your goal is this, that's my goal. It was funny because Jaime, my brother-in-law, he was having problems with the request for repairs process. And the client would ask for like a pretty high number, like $10,000-$15,000. And Jaime would get a little upset, be like, I can't believe that there's clients asking for $15,000. I looked at the home inspection report. Like there's nothing else that justifies $15,000. And what was happening is that he was being lazy, meaning like he wasn't going through the process of like getting the contractor estimates for all the items to be able to justify what the client wanted to get. So in his mind, it was just like, it's not being justified. And I noticed that he was getting frustrated. So we went over this tool that basically gives them a lump sum of all the repairs within 24 hours. You pay like $75. It's a great tool. And all of a sudden, when he went from like, why is this client requesting this, instead of that's their goal, let me try to see what I can do to help them accomplish that goal, it switched. And basically, he started getting better requests for repairs. And even when he didn't get the request for repairs, the client felt like he was trying to help them and help them accomplish their goal. And a lot of times they would be okay with it versus the first approach, which was kind of like, I can't believe they're doing this. I can't believe that they're asking for that much.
Yeah. And what came up for me as I hear you speaking is like, you've mentioned this, and I know that this is true because I've experienced it as well, is like sometimes you'll have people, let's say, on your team that are speaking to somebody and they're like, nah, bro, these people aren't going to do anything. And you're like, yo, let me talk to them. Mm-hmm. And because you deploy empathy and you position yourself as the guide and you ask questions, you will set an appointment with them and they'll think it's magic, but it's not. It's a very intentional, purposeful approach. And what he said also too, which was fascinating to me, is that you can have a better product, an inferior product, and beat somebody with a better product if you have better messaging. That's wild. Okay. Mm-hmm. If your messaging speaks to survive or thrive, and if it is easy to understand, meaning it'll consume less calories, you'll beat somebody that has a superior product. He also said that we don't choose, like the people who lead the world tell the best stories, and that we don't choose our leaders because of competency. We choose them based on messaging. And he had this very interesting example. So I'm aware, when you talk about politics, like, I don't know, maybe this will get flagged or whatever, but it was interesting what he was saying, where he was like, if you look at like Jeb Bush, let's say, amply qualified, bro, right? He comes from a family that has 2 presidents, right? He had $115 million that he raised, just came off a fundraiser with like $5 million. You know what his slogan was? Jeb can fix it. Who's the hero?
He is.
Hillary, another one. You know what Hillary's slogan was? I am with her. Who's the hero?
She is.
Yeah. You know what Obama's slogan is? Yes, we can. Who's the hero? You see that?
Yeah.
Bro, that's unbelievable. That just messaging and how you present something can make all the difference in the world, right? So it just really kind of speaks to what we try to share with people and disseminate to all the people in the organization at the Elite Builders, as well as anybody that we come into contact with these videos or, on those kind of live role plays that we do, that if you make them the hero, I'm a guide. My role is to help them to accomplish their goal. And my messaging matters. If I'm making myself the hero in my messaging, don't you know who I am? And I sold X amount of properties while your home was on the market. That's making you the hero, bro, not them. Right? I feel confident I can get this done. That's making you the hero. Mm-hmm. Versus asking questions to find out, is this move about surviving or thriving? And can I make my messaging as clear and concise as possible, easy to understand, expend very simple calories, which makes it easy for someone to do 2 things: pay attention to me while I'm talking to them, and also, number 2, make a decision to either book an appointment or hire me or whatever.
Got it.
So I guess, how is this applicable also to when we present? Because I know you do presentations on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. I started to think about that as well, right? Because most people, when they do presentations, they do it kind of traditionally, where they just speak and spit words at people. But who's the hero in doing that?
You are.
So how can you use, and what my intention is to do, Jose, so I'm reading the book right now. Mm-hmm. I got a copy of it. He also has an online program where you can have access to like a course. My intention is to get that and to get enough seats for the people in the organization that are doing kind of talks, so that way they can study it and we can start to intentionally and purposely implement it when we're having conversations with people.
I love it. It's funny. I have somebody that I think he's one of their partners for StoryBrand, and I was trying to get some messaging for the Morales group.
Yeah.
And I don't know if basically, and we didn't go through the whole exercise, but we had this at Collective Genius or something similar. And what we kind of came up with was like need to sell, and then Morales makes it simple. But I don't know if that would match what we're talking about. So how would you adjust?
Yeah.
That?
So he gave, and again, I'm learning this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But he gave like a sequence, and you start with the problem. So it's like, here, I'll do it for like coaching or for like Elite Builders. You know how most agents are very buyer heavy, mm-hmm. and as such don't have control of their time, or income. Uh-huh. What I do is I help agents list more property in high volume by teaching them the skills and the mindset that are required, so they can have more control of their time and make more money. It's very clear on what we're actually doing. Now, I'm sure that there's probably more than one loop there. Yeah. You can make it even more clear and concise, but that's the idea, right? So you start with the problem. Here's the solution. Here's the end result. And he gave this like formula, right? So Hold on, let me pull it up.
Tired
On how
of
to,
tired of working with buyers.
yes,
Tired of putting buyers in your car
yes,
and having
that's
them
right.
not buy a property.
Yep. So, yeah. So, and he gave an example like how, because he's like 52, but he has a 3-year-old, and he's like, yeah, I was looking for a trainer, like a physical trainer, and one guy was like, yeah, like I can help you. Like after 6 weeks, you'll be able to bench press like 600 pounds or 300 pounds. I know a lot about protein synthesis and nutrition. He's like, I'm not really paying attention to that guy. He said the second guy was like, yeah, what I do is I help men your age between 50 and 60 who have young children through exercise live longer so they can hold their grandbabies. He's like, I'm going to give that guy all my fucking money. All because of messaging.
Yeah.
Right. He gave another example of like a private chef where, let's say you're interviewing for a private chef, or you and Mariela, and one comes over like, yeah, I graduated from this chef school in France, and here's the people that I work with, and blah, blah, blah. You're like, okay. Another one says, Jose, how like we're all really, really busy. And as such, it's very difficult to find the time to eat a really nice meal with your family at the same table.
Mm-hmm.
What I do is I cook for families twice a week so they can ensure that they're getting that family time together and breaking bread together. That's like, oh, yeah, I want to do, because notice, one is not talking about survival or thriving. The other one is. So messaging matters. And he did this thing, Jose, it was crazy, bro. He had people stand up and tell him what they do. And it was like fantastic in the sense that like most entrepreneurs and most business people, they can't clearly articulate what they do in a way that's easily digestible and easy to understand.
Mm-hmm.
It's not clear and concise. And for that reason, I think it leads to a lack of business deals and opportunities. Roy asks, what book do you recommend everyone read to improve how to speak to clients and be confident? The book you recommended, I will finish by next Friday. Yeah. So, I can give one and you could give one, Jose. In terms of speaking with clients, there's a book that's called, I'll give you a couple, right? One is called The 7 Powers of Questions. I think people think it's like communicating, but really high level communication is asking questions because it causes people to actually think. The second one is Everybody Communicates and Few Connect. That's written by a guy named John Maxwell.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good book as well. How about you? You got any books for communication?
I don't know if for communication I have any books. I can tell you what worked for me. So I basically just role played and practiced like twice a day, 7 days a week. And I think that was more, I role played, practiced, chanted, and prospected 6 days a week for the last 8 years. And I would say that helped me more than anything, because what's going to happen is I would probably say just reflection. Like I just, we're making a cash offer to a seller and we're using a new contract, and she came up with some objections. Like, hey, the 8-day due diligence period is kind of long. Like, what type of due diligence are you going to do? And I'm like, okay, like I've never had this objection because it's a new contract. How do I implement it? So what I would say is, if you notice that you're not getting the desired outcome, just reflect and then be like, okay, how can I modify this to get the desired outcome? But I'd probably say doing it. And I think Alex Hormozy says this, that like calling for 10,000 hours or practicing for a certain amount of time is going to give you more value than the book. Or there's 2 ways of doing it. One, you read the book and you don't prospect, practice, role play, and you read the book first. You will get more out of those books once you do the activity basically over and over, because then you'll be like, oh, that's why they're saying this in the book, basically.
Yeah. So there's a hierarchy of learning. At the bottom of the hierarchy of learning is reading and writing, which is interesting because that's how we get formal education, but it's the lowest form of learning. The second highest form of learning is simulating. So that's like pretending to do the real thing.
Role play.
Yeah, role play. And doctors, they simulate on cadavers. We don't let them touch real people until they touch dead people.
Yeah.
Pilots, we don't let them in planes with real people until they or on a device called a simulator. The military are constantly running drills, simulating, doing the real thing. So for us, that's role play and practice. And then the highest level of learning is doing the real thing.
Yeah.
So if you do what Jose is saying, which is read, write out scripts, chant, read, write, simulate, role play, do the real thing. If you do that every day, read, write, simulate, do the real thing, read, write, simulate, do the real thing, read, write, simulate, do the real thing. If you do that for 6 to 12 months, your skills will increase dramatically.
Way more than a book.
Way more than watching others do it.
Yeah. It was funny. It makes me think of a story. I had this new agent that came on my team one time, and I was prospecting, and I had the guy on speaker, and the guy gives me an objection. And then after we get off the call, the buyer's agent's like, "Hey, bro, like in that situation, why didn't you just say this or say that instead?" And he was watching, basically. I told him, "Look, bro, I'll be very transparent with you. When it happens in the moment, sometimes like it happens a lot faster than if you're just like watching and listening. I'm like, let's try it with you." So he jumps on a call, and then he gets like an objection or something. And I'm like,
and he froze.
And he froze. And then I start telling him, "Hey, bro, like, why don't you just go like this or go like that?" You know?
Yeah. And what that reminds me of is I was having a conversation with my son, Sebastian, and he plays soccer, and, you know, he's pretty good. And he, at the end of a game, I'll ask him, I'll be like, "Hey, what'd you do well? And where's an area of improvement?" So he might be like, "Yeah, you know, I scored a goal or two. I had an assist." I'm like, "All right, where's the area of improvement?" And what we noticed is an area of improvement that showed up a couple times. We'll get to your question in a minute, Donald. An area of improvement that showed up a couple times was when he has open shots on goal, when he's driving by himself. He would like, and then he'd end up kicking it directly towards the goalie. Mm-hmm. So I explained to him, I'm like, "Do you know why that's happening?" He's like, "Why?" I'm like, "Because it's happening really fast for you. So do you know how you can slow it down?" He was like, "What?" I'm like, "Do it 1,000 times. And if you do it so many times, like just rolling the ball, you driving directly and kicking, like what'll happen is that whole experience will slow down dramatically. And the speed with which me and Jose hear things, I promise you, is much slower than the way you're hearing it, right? Because you're focused on worried about what to say next, and we're not really thinking about that. So it allows the whole process to get slowed down. It's the only way you can do that is through repetition. Yeah, Roy, repetition is the mother of learning and the father of action, which makes it the architect of accomplishment, right? So Donald asked, "Hey guys, I'm getting started in real estate and I want to work with agents as a wholesaler. How can I best bring value to agents?" Give them deals, bro. Like, I think, you know, being like a go-giver really long-term matters. You know, I think most people in business kind of lead with, it's like what Gary Vee says. It's like most people are like hook, hook, hook. It's like ask, 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 ask. Like, yo, you got a deal, yo, you got a deal, yo, you got a deal, yo, you got a deal. Instead of jab, 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 which is you lead with value, give, then ask. And a perfect example of that, if you're getting into wholesaling, Don, is Pace, you know, Morby and his squad up thing. I was just at his event. I mean, Pace just is like give. And then he's like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I'm doing this event." And then everybody comes, right? So that's what I would suggest. Try to figure out ways you can add value, pay for their dialer, you know, like real tangible shit. Not like, "Yo, I'm going to take you out for coffee." It's like top agents don't need your coffee money. Mm-hmm. And top agents, truthfully, have a bunch of people that want to be on lists for opportunities. So it's a relationship game. It's value in relationships.
I would also say just getting back to people fast as well, too. I would say that would make you valuable as well. I know that when I work with other wholesalers, I just want to know yes or no. Can you do it? Can you not? How fast can you get a response back to me? And then if you can't do it, letting them know like, "Hey, look, this is why I can't do it." Yeah. That way, like, they're not bringing you the same problem over and over again, basically.
Yeah. And to that point, I've had so many of them where they're like, you know, yeah. Yeah, they're like, yeah. Oh, yeah. And you talk to your seller or whatever, and then they're like, "Oh, no," and they make you look like a jackass. And it's like, dude, don't do that. Like, if you're going to have a conversation with a top producing agent who does volume, these unicorn agents, you have to make a decision fast, have super high levels of integrity, and if you say you're going to do something, you do it. You're not going to get under contract and then come back and ask for like a $20,000 concession. Like, don't do that, right? Because we've had all of this conversation with the seller just to get them to kind of accept the offer, and it's an extension of us because we're bringing you to the table. So if you don't perform or you don't have integrity or whatever, which I'm not suggesting that's true for you, Donald, but if you don't perform and you make the agent look like an idiot, they're not going to do business with you.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the very first investors that I started working with was Angel back in the day. And he told me, he's like, look, whatever we say, that's what we're going to do. And even if it means us losing money, we're going to do whatever we said that we're going to do, because that's what we said that we're going to do. And it was funny because I was even listening to that Founders podcast again. And they were talking, they had the story of Open Door, not the story of Open Door. They talked about like, oh no, that was Mike Delpritz. Mike Delpritz, yeah. He had the Open Door people. Yep. And they talked about how during the interest rate hike or during the pandemic when it hit, they were under contract on a bunch of homes. And they knew that they were going to take a hit on it because the market had already adjusted on all the homes that they were under contract. And they had to make a decision whether or not they were going to close on them or whether they were going to walk. And they ended up making a decision to close on the homes, knowing that they were going to take the hit and knowing that they were going to lose money. Because what they said is that, why do people come to us? They come to us because they know that when we say we're going to do something, we're going to do it. That's what our brand stands for. And that's what our brand is. How on brand would we be if in the very first moment that something goes bad, we run to the hills? Are we going to be looked at as a reputable / respectable brand that people know that they can count on in the most difficult times? And they close on it and they took a big hit on it.
Yeah, I listened to the same podcast and I thought that was very accurate, which was they made a decision that taking a hit, what it would do is establish
trust.
And if they didn't do it, they would be violating people's trust if they backed out of all the agreements, which they could have done because they had provisions there to do it. But they said if we do that, it'll be good for short term, but it won't be good for long term. People won't trust us anymore. So Christopher says, what's up, Chris? Elite builder in the house. That's clutch as an investor, agent, relationships. Also, when making offers on other listings as an investor, listing agents and REO agents do have lists of agents that waste their time. Yeah, 100%. Real estate with Jose. Hey, would you recommend co-brokering with a more experienced listing agent if you don't have many deals under your belt? I started in 2020. I started off hot, but stepped away the last couple of years. Yep. So the only reason that you would co-broker with someone else is because perhaps you lack confidence. Confidence is really about trust. If that partnership is going to allow you to learn something, then I would be like, yeah, sure. You know what I mean? Because you're going to have to pay to get access to learn something, whether it's coaching, whether it's partnering, like whatever it is, you got to pay to get access, right? Now, I wouldn't have that be a crutch because that's what that runs the risk of doing, right? So I had a coaching client. I'll give an example. She's a rock star, does like 50 deals a year now. But when I met her doing nothing, she was in pharmaceutical sales and she thought this was going to be like easy peasy. But in pharmaceutical sales, the doctors are waiting for you. Here, you got to go find them. Right. So it took her a little bit to get up and going and took a little bit to get it going. And now she's a rock star. But at the beginning, she was taking her husband as a seasoned agent. She would take him with her on all the listing appointments. So I didn't know this, but we were on a coaching call and she just happens to say like, oh yeah, like, he's going to come with me. I said, what'd you just say? She's like, yeah, he's been coming with me all listing appointments. I'm like, I didn't know that. May I make a suggestion? She's like, yeah. I'm like, stop it immediately. She's like, why? I'm like, because it's a crutch. And you're never actually going to learn. You know what it's like, Jose? I'm sure when you're in the driver's seat, your level of attention when you're driving a vehicle is different than when you're in the passenger seat. Mm-hmm. When you're in the passenger seat, you're just like, whatever. You're not even paying attention, really. You're just like, whatever,
Yeah.
But if you're driving, you have to be dialed in. So what I would suggest, Jose, real estate with Jose is like, yeah, that's fine. Short term, maybe to learn a few things, but to develop the competency and trust in yourself, which is going to come through role play and practice. We have a role play group just for the listing presentation. Role play partner 5 days a week. All you have to do is show up. That long term is going to be a better decision over time.
Yeah. And then what Aaron is referring to in the short term, that like this was helpful for me at the very beginning of my career. I saw like a listing presentation by Vicente, and I was like, oh man, like his listing presentation is completely different than what I'm used to doing. So I incorporated some things from his presentation and then made it my own. The other times I've ever gone on presentations, and that was as I was building trust in myself and as I was building confidence in what I was doing. The other time that I've done it is where like maybe it was like a ranch property and I had never listed a big ranch. And I was like, dude, I don't even know how to value this. I don't know I don't know how to value this. So I brought on an agent that specializes in ranch, went on a couple of appointments with him. I learned what I needed to learn. And then I started going on the ranch appointments by myself. But I got to kind of see how he presents since he was like a dominant, like agricultural type of agent. So I saw how he valued the orchards, how he presented the price per acre and that sort of thing. And that was extremely helpful for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, again, like information is the real currency. So if I have to pay to get access, you got to share a deal or two or whatever. I don't think that's bad at all. Just don't let it be a business strategy long term.
Sure.
Do it short term to get the information that you need. So that way you can go out and start doing it yourself.
Well, even this, like I've heard of agents that are like, oh yeah, like I'm going to bring my stager to the listing appointment, almost like the stager is going to help them secure the listing by having the conversation with the stager. I kind of see that as a crutch as well too, because what if the stager says the wrong thing? Then you're out the listing appointment. I don't bring my stager in or my interior design gal until I've got a signed contract. I'm responsible for getting that signed contract. Once I get that signed contract, then they get access to the entire team after that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So again, when we say the word confidence, a lot of people, when I ask people what that word means, they give these like very interesting answers. But what it really means is trust. That's the Latin derivative of that word, like confianza. It means to trust, but it's who are you trusting? Yourself. The only way to cultivate trust in yourself is to do something over and over and over and over and over again, ad nauseum. And that is what we were just talking about in terms of that opportunity. The hierarchy of learning. Read, write, simulate, which is role play, and do the real thing, which is prospect and go on appointments. Read, write, simulate, do the real thing. And it still will take time. Jose, I think he went on like 100 listing appointments, took 20 listings or something like that, something crazy.
I failed.
Yeah. So it took a while for him to continue to refine what he was doing. He had the work ethic to, prospect and set all the appointments, but his approach was a little off. And then once we helped him to augment his approach, that's when he started to get, really massive results list, whatever it is, 80 homes a year, whatever it is.
Yeah. And then just make sure that whoever you're shadowing to, that their presentation is rock solid as well. Because there's a difference between taking listings from like people that know you and taking listings from people that are cold as well too. Obviously, the listing appointment for people that know you is going to be a lot easier, and a lot of times you're not going to get as like very little objections as somebody who's like cold. So I would say just make sure that like if you're learning from somebody that you're also incorporating that into it, because you could pick up a couple bad habits as just by watching other people as well too.
Yeah, 100%. Because if the individual is the majority of their business is past client centers of influence, the truth is that they're not really having to present that strongly, right? Because people already know them, like them, love them. There's not a lot of objections. They may not be competing frequently, and it's not going to be as good of an education. So when Jose wanted to figure out how to list property in high volume, he did the homework, did the research, checked it out, like kind of did his due diligence to make sure that the person that he was going to give his time to had a demonstrated track record of listing property from strangers, because that means you are competing at high levels. That means you are handling objections at high levels. Prior to him deciding that he was going to give him his time, energy, and effort. So it says, Roy says, been bringing on your material, so much to learn. It's like drinking from a fire hydrant. Yeah, bro, that's the intention, dude. But I would just elongate time horizons, because when you see me and Jose do this stuff, this is you get rewarded in public for what you spend countless hours doing in private. I sold real estate for 17 years, Jose for about 10. You didn't see us when we were making $13,000 calendar year. You didn't see Jose when he didn't sell a single home in 6 months. You didn't see us when he went on 100 listing appointments and 20 of them, he only got 20, which is incredibly difficult mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, questioning whether or not you made the right decision, if you're any good at this, if it's ever going to work, right? So, yeah, I mean, it just goes back to what we were just talking about. The way that I view me and Jose is just as guides. That's it. You guys are the heroes. Like, our intention is to help you to make your goal and objectives a reality, whatever that is. You want to do 20 deals, you want to do 50 deals, you want to do 100 deals, you want to build an organization of 100 agents, like whatever it is, our role is to guide you through that, right? And just equip you with what you need to accomplish it. Here he says, from what you were saying, confidence thing I need to work on. My thought was to bring someone along to legitimate. Yeah, I get that. But think about it. Underneath the track record and underneath, the luxury is just like, it's really either I don't feel worthy, I don't feel good enough, or I don't trust myself. That's really what's going on. You know what I'm saying? So the only way that you can cultivate that is by doing hard things and making yourself more valuable.
And sometimes that track record helps people with their confidence. Sometimes getting a couple deals under their belt helps them. And if that's required for you, just know that it's a short-term strategy. And I think that's the way that you're approaching it. I think that the way you're approaching it is short-term, and then long-term, the goal is to start going off on your own. But yeah, I've done it before, and it has even been a confidence thing, like where it's even like a luxury listing and I haven't sold the property in that price point or whatever, where I bring on another agent. Even at my level, there's certain things that I haven't done it, but I'm paying attention as much as I can. I'm asking questions, and I'm like, okay, like, what did I learn from this? And I'm incorporating and making adjustments as well too, Yeah,
I love this. So Tom McKenna, who's shout out to Tom, the baby face assassin, because he looks like a little kid. He's been in our group coaching for a while, dude, like over a year. And he said, he texted me yesterday, highest price listing in my career, picked it up right after you told me to go to war with agents in the neighborhood. Because he was operating under this assumption mentally, like, oh, there's these top agents. I'm like, so what, bro? Like, just like, you have to push your way in. Like, the way it works on planet Earth is nobody's going to give you anything. Like, you're going to have to take it. So keep calling in the neighborhoods and that sort of thing. So $1.6 million listing in the Boston area. He's in his 20s. So, and what I told him, I said, the only way power transfers hands is with war. You have to push your way in, take market share. Right? And I think that's true. So there's two ways to go about it, Jose. One is what you were proposing. It's fine. Like Jose and I are saying, you can do it. It's a short-term strategy. Don't depend on it. Maybe do it a handful of times with the goal and objective of learning, not of hiding, right? Not of hiding behind them or their track record. And then the second thing is the way you cultivate trust in yourself is by doing hard things. And also by doing like repetition, right? So getting your presentation dialed in. I had another guy, Josh, he reached out. He just partnered with us in Arizona, and he was like, I think that's where he is. Yeah. He said he took, he made $60,000 in 30 days with the listing presentation script. He's like, I actually went in, I studied it, I role played it, and I went in. It was like a $1.3 million listing. I did exactly what you told me to do, and they listed the property. And when he said that to me, it was so interesting because he was like surprised. I'm like, yeah, why are you fucking surprised, bro? Like, of course it's gonna work. You think I listed 100 homes a year for 10 years in a row by accident? Like, why would I tell you something that doesn't work, right? Jose says there is no try, the Yoda of real estate. Appreciate you, brother. Maybe me. Jose's a little younger than me. You know what I mean? Maybe he's Luke Skywalker. I'm Yoda. I don't know. Chris Perez. Yeah, Arizona and Oregon. That's where Josh is. He's a rock star. So yeah, to just kind of recap again, story brand, how that fits into what we do as salespeople. Most salespeople try to make themselves the hero. And that's the wrong approach. You know, don't you know who I am? You know how many homes I've sold while your home has been on the market? Who's the hero? Fucking you, dude. Like, that's why they stop paying attention. And they don't make the client the hero, right? They don't ask questions to find out, hey, is this move about pain or is it about thriving? Is it about surviving or thriving? Surviving will be things like death, divorce, job relocation, moving to assisted living facilities, financial kind of burdens. Thriving is like, I want to be closer to my family, closer to my grandkids. I got a new job, which is going to be an upgrade for me. You know what I'm saying? That's thriving. And asking questions around that, so that way that becomes the focus and they become the focus. And just the process of doing that positions them as the hero and you as the guide. And when you do that, you're actually communicating with people in a way that has been around since humans have had speech. And you're communicating in a way that is in alignment with the way your brain works. Your brain works in that it's basically trying to figure out constantly, is this going to help me survive or thrive? And conserving calories, right? Is this difficult for me to understand procedurally? How does this work? So he also said, Jose, and I'll share this as well, you need to give people like 3 steps on how to work with you. If it's more than that, it's too complicated. So let's say somebody has an interest. They're like, all right, well, how does it work? Right? People say this all the time. Well, if I did want to hire you, how does it work? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you some questions to find out specifically what your goals and objectives are, your timeframes are, so we can tailor an approach for you and your family that'll help you to get what you want in the time you want. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to meet together in person. I'll survey the property. So that way I can give you some pointers and tips with regards to what we need to do to make sure we maximize value and get the job done quickly and efficiently. And then the third thing we'll do is, provided that it all makes sense and you feel comfortable and confident, I'll have the appropriate paperwork with me. We can authorize and take the next steps. How does that sound? It's very clear and understandable, right? He gave an example like with that chef where he's like, yeah, here's how it works. First, what I'm going to do is ask you a bunch of questions about your favorite restaurants. What's comfort food? What'd you grow up eating? The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to your house and I'm going to cook a meal for you, Mariela, and the 2 kids. And it'll be $150. Now, it'll probably be more than one meal, right? Because there'll be some leftovers. The third thing is, if you guys decide to, you'll retain me and I will cook for you twice a week. And the cost is $1,000 a month, not including groceries. Very, very clear. Here are the steps on how we can do business together. So the first thing we're going to do, Jose, is we're going to, let's say somebody expresses interest in partnering with us. Here's a 3-step process. First thing we're going to do is we're going to hop on a call so I can find out what your goals and objectives are and how we can serve you and how we can add value. Once you decide that it makes sense, then I'm going to send you the application electronically where you can fill it out. Once you show up in the system, you'll get access to all the coaching and training that we provide so we can help you to accomplish your goals and objectives. Are you clear on that? Yes. Do you wish to proceed? I do. Do you see? Very clear and concise steps on how to do it. Acting like a hero right after flexing about he listed all these homes. Well, the thing is, TP Rev, is that it's not what I'm doing there is demonstrating competency, not flexing. They're different, right? They're not the same thing. So, and the only time that I do that is if somebody challenges me directly. So if you've ever heard role plays, like I would encourage you to go back and listen to all the role plays that we do. I'm never talking about myself, which I can easily do because I have the track record to do it. The only time I do is when somebody challenges me directly. So if Jose was to say to me, well, how many homes have you sold in my neighborhood? It's like, well, I appreciate you asking. And I know underneath that question is whether or not I can help you to sell yours, right? Because this conversation is really not about me. It's not about the other agents that are calling you. It's really about you and your family and you guys accomplishing your goals and objectives. Now, we've had the good fortune of helping over 2,000 families get their, goals and objectives met as far as real estate is concerned. I tell you that not to brag or boast, but just to demonstrate to you, it's not a question of whether or not I can help you. I definitely can. It's really just a question of me figuring out what you're looking to accomplish and why, and coming up with a game plan so we can help you to get what you want in the time you want. Does that make sense?
It does.
So that's the only time that that's going to happen. And you'll notice the way that I present it, I'm not leading with authority. That's what I mean by that. Most agents lead with authority, and the reason they do is because they're insecure. Hope that makes sense, TP Rev.
I think that was handleable.
Yeah. Like a pro, you know what I mean? So again, we want to encourage agents to really think about how you're presenting, think about how you're asking questions. Am I making myself the hero? Am I making them the hero? Am I demonstrating competency, whether it be through reviews that they see online that demonstrates competency, whether it be with a website that they can go to that demonstrate competency, or my social profiles. Ask yourself a question, right? Let's say Jose talks to somebody. They don't know who he is. they Google him and one of his social profiles come up with 142,000 followers with him giving explanations as far as like real estate is concerned and teaching people things, that demonstrates competency. Now, somebody might be like, well, you know, you're flexing on him. It's like, nah, dude, you're demonstrating that you know what you're doing. So making sure that you position yourself as a guide and they're the hero. Anything else you want to add to that, Hosey?
That's pretty much it.
That's it. That's what's up. So that's what we do here. We do the good shit, not the bullshit. Elite builders, coast to coast, right? Let's go, let's grow. Look forward to catching you on the next one every Friday, 1:30 Eastern. Peace out,
guys.